Uncontrolled rage, senseless aggression, the only thing that separates us from the Canadians. Well, that real bacon, eh? Certainly here in the States, violence is prominent, but we find hostile students all over the world. Many of you chose to work with youngsters who have low frustration tolerance, who can become verbally and physically aggressive. Others of you didn't choose this professional avenue, but you got it anyway. We're here to help. We're here to talk today about ways to prevent and diffuse hostile incidents and to help chronically aggressive youngsters perceive events differently, to provide them with more socially acceptable alternative behaviors that still meet their needs. Thank you for joining us.
Hello and welcome to another podcast courtesy of BehaviorAdvisor.com. I'm Virginia Tong. Shortly after his introductory remarks, Dr. Mack was brutally pecked by a massive flock of Canadian geese. However, he's nursing his wounds with a poultice made of maple leaves soaked in Molson Canadian ale, so he expects to return shortly to talk about how to reach and teach students who display aggressive behavior patterns. Please be aware that the first 3 podcasts in this multi-part presentation are in video form. The remainder are in audio form and accompany a document that can be printed from BehaviorAdvisor.com. Here he comes now using a hockey stick as a crutch. I present to you Dr. Tom McIntyre. Oh, let me take the feather out of your hair, sir.
Thank you, and welcome to a multiple-part podcast on aggression, preventing it, diffusing it, responding to it after the incident has passed. First, though, we're going to take about 25 minutes to cover some introductory knowledge, build a solid foundation for action. You see it here on our agenda. We're going to better comprehend and organize violent acts for our event reports, for our functional behavior assessments, for our manifestation determination investigations, or perhaps for police reports. We'll then talk about how one intervenes when one student aggresses upon another, followed by what we would do if a violent act was directed against us. We'll finish the podcast with some school-wide programs and strategies for promoting a safe and welcoming environment. It struck me that people oftentimes bear an emotional likeness to parts of our granite planet. Some folks resemble geographic areas that have a thicker crust, and they keep the heated and destructive emotional magma contained. Others are more like our thin-crusted areas, where there's frequent volcanic activity and oftentimes a danger to those nearby, as is the case for our chronically aggressive kids, whose emotional pain lies bubbling just under the present calm. This comparison to volcanoes occurred to me while I was on holiday in spectacular Costa Rica. Certainly not due to any unfortunate interactions I had with the friendly and the good-natured Ticos who reside there. It was on extended stay at the Volcan Arenal, the Arenal volcano. Arenal is one of the more active volcanoes. Every couple of hours it pops its cork. So I'm laying there in a hot spring that runs off the side of the mountain, sipping on a cool brew and enjoying this wondrous, placid view, akin to when I'm in class with my BD kids and they're on task and cooperative. But then you sense a rumbling, and you search out its source, and you spot it, and you bear witness to this eye-opening, jaw-dropping, explosive event. Moments later, a concussive boom just rattles you, and you're involuntarily drawn into the event. Eventually, things calm, or so it seems. I mean, the pyrotechnics have subsided, but you now find yourself immersed in this odious atmosphere as this sulfurous, rotten egg stink hangs over the area for the longest time. Sort of like in the classroom when the air isn't fully cleared after a behavioral incident. It's sort of like the geothermal equivalent of a fart, or as my 4-year-old calls it, butt burps. But time passes, and everything seems to have cooled. However, Hawaiians will tell you this is not always the case. Travel to that little piece of paradise, and you'll no doubt hear about A'a lava. That under an apparently cool facade is broiling tension. Everything looks all right, but there's very much like emotional issues oftentimes simmer under a subsumed cool attitude. The term ah coming from stepping on there, thinking that it's just fine, and finding out it's not and going ah. So let's look at kids who don't blow their top. Some kids can let a stressful incident pass. They don't blow up. Many don't erupt as quickly or frequently as others, even though they have similar life histories and child-rearing histories. So why is this? What helps you vent when you're perturbed or frustrated? For some, it's having a physical workout. For others, it's immersing yourself in the joy and distraction of a hobby. Others of us are aware of what's known as the contagion of behavior. We tend to react as other people act upon us. If you go into the dry cleaner and this person says, "Good morning," chances are we'll say, "Good morning." If someone says, "What are you doing?" you say, "Hey, what do you think I'm doing?" Typically, we respond in a manner to which we're acted upon. And if we are aware of this contagion of behavior, there are ways to avoid getting drawn into the conflict cycle, as it's called by Nick Long, who developed that conflict cycle model. We say, I've got goals in life, and I don't want to lose them. Or we say, this person has the problem, not me, even though they're trying to place it on me. I won't have it placed on me. I'll react in a way that is different than expected, or I'll leave the area. Our goal is to create a dormant, peaceful reminder of this former youngster. We are going to help this aggressive, explosive, violent youngster change. We'll talk today about ways to help them extinguish the bubbling cauldron, while also talking about how we react wisely and safely when we're placed in harm's way. For those of you working with youngsters who can be aggressive, we'll be talking about what to do to prevent that aggression from surfacing, how to respond if it does emerge, and how to work during full-blown events involving student-to-student aggression or student-to-teacher aggression. Now you're on your own in teacher-to-teacher fights. Personally, I used to blind my opponent with a cloud of chalk dust by clapping the erasers in front of them. Anyhow, that's the end of the travel log. So, do you know the punchline to this joke? How do you tell a male chromosome from a female chromosome? You pull off their genes. A little humor there. Very little in some people's minds. But aggression does seem to peak at 2 to 3 years of age, which suggests a genetic etiology, a genetic cause, according to Trembley's study in 2000. Guo in 2008 studied 20,000 7th and 8th graders. He found aggression genes, 3 of them were being studied, in 1% of the population, 1% of that 20,000 students. There was an increased likelihood of aggression, a genetic disposition. Like most genetic dispositions, it needs to be triggered by something in the environment. Triggered by stress, family dysfunction, school failure, social failure. One group, though, had its risk reduced to nil, to zero, by regular family dinners. The conclusion? A sense of belonging counteracts the gene so that it doesn't present itself. It does seem that nurture can mediate nature. That means that we can make a difference in lives of kids even if they're genetically predisposed to aggression and if they've had those stressors in their lives that bring out that genetic component. Well, let's look at some of the home-based attributes that we need to counteract. Be they stressors that have set off that genetic predisposition, or whether the aggression that we find in our youngsters has been environmentally promoted. Let's consider some of the home precursors to in-school violence. Violence becomes a youngster's default coping skills, so to speak, due to any number of reasons. Some of the more common ones are that aggression was modeled by family members. Children emulate what they see in the home. Perhaps it was harsh and inconsistent punishment versus harsh and consistent punishment, but not knowing when it's going to come, that sometimes you do the right thing and you're punished, sometimes you do the wrong thing, you're not punished. However, interestingly, a warm relationship with one parent can mediate the effects of this harsh and inconsistent and punitive child-rearing style. Youngsters who are aggressive oftentimes come from homes where there are more commands and demands. The youngster is taught to obey rather than reason. And then we get kids who become bossy, punitive kids, just like their bossy, punitive parents. Another consideration is that the youngster's aggressive actions and reactions have brought benefits due to the lack of supervision, correction, and teaching by the elders. We've certainly all heard about the watching of violent media. We do know from research that there do seem to be some short-term effects, that after having watched the media, kids are more susceptible to engage in aggressive acts, and that some kids are more susceptible than others, perhaps due to the teachings in the home. Another group of youngsters may be displaying aggression due to limited or inappropriate interaction or social skills with peers and adults. We see this when a preschooler runs up behind another child, hits them, and runs away, thinking that this is how you make friends. The preteen who picks on a girl that he admires, that he is attracted to. And there is one segment of our population, anywhere in this world, that in general witnesses and uses more aggression, both verbal and physical. The research over the last 50 years finds some important things about low socioeconomic status cultural markers. Whenever we discuss a group of people, there are certain cautions that are important to keep in mind. While we can generalize or say that certain characteristics are more prominent within that group, we do not want to stereotype to say that all individuals within that group exhibit those behaviors. Ruby Payne, in her book Framework for Understanding Poverty, differentiates the organized lower-class home, one that holds high standards for its youngsters, provides good child-rearing support, from the disorganized lower-class household, which is filled with social ills. However, in the lower classes, we do find a greater use of coarse language, a greater use of physicality, a greater use of inconsistent punishment within the home, and less parental guidance. In fact, Downey in '93 estimated that 10% of African American youth are zero-parented. Low-income households are found among all of the cultural groups. In an interesting research study by Haberman and Schreiber-Dill, this is in Kappa Delta Pi Records, summer of 1995, they interviewed kids, white and Hispanic middle schoolers from low-income households, and the results they found were that fighting was viewed as natural and expected, that a swift, violent revenge was viewed as an acceptable response to an insult received at any level. He looked at me weird. He insulted my mom, a game oftentimes known as the dozens, rankin' moms, or playing house. Or he threatened to kill me. These youngsters believed that it was not right to bring in adult figures to prevent violence. They believed that school fighting should not be punished. These interviews backed up data and ethnographic findings from previous studies. Certainly, poor parenting is not strictly the domain of low SES kids. That point is illustrated in the cartoon you're viewing. As we end this segment of the podcast, part 2 will be focusing on various types of aggression.